Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Breaking Points. We've got Ryan Grimm in for Sagar this morning because Sagar just got married this weekend. Congratulations to Sagar and Jillian.
Congratulations, Sagar. I'm sure he's bothered to be missing this week.
Yeah.
But if you got to miss it, what better reason?
I have a feeling
than a wedding and a honeymoon.
if Jillian wouldn't instantly divorce him if he was here, he would be here. But we hope he is enjoying with his beautiful bride. And we got some pictures we'll share with you in a minute. But we have a lot to. Oh, there he is. Sagar and Jillian. They did a part Indian portion of the wedding. They did a part Western style portion of the wedding. The picture is absolutely gorgeous. Congratulations to them. Magical evening, and yeah, we hope that he is enjoying and staying away from the news as much as possible. And we expect him to be back here in the studio on Thursday. So there you go.
Yeah, the whole wedding was spectacular. And if you want to do a little special wedding gift for Sagar and Jillian, breakingpoints.com, subscribe to the show. Nothing makes Sagar happier than to see those subscriptions coming in to keep the show going.
I can vouch that is definitely the case. So, and thank you guys so much for supporting us. We've got a few things to get to this morning. A little bit of news going on in this country. Obviously, we're going to bring you all the latest about Biden withdrawing from the 2024 race, the likely ascent of Kamala Harris, although Ryan and I, because we love to fight losing battles, are going to continue to make the case for an open convention because that's just how it is on the left. We also are going to take a look at the Democratic reaction, which was slobbering of Joe Biden and over the top, the Republican reaction, which was total meltdown and freak out. We're going to take a look at not only Kamala Harris, how she's polling, how she may run against Donald Trump, all of those things. Also, those people who, like Barack Obama, who are still making the case for an open process and whether that has any chance of potentially playing out. We're also going to look at who she could pick as her vice presidential nominee. There's already some top names in the running. We'll give you a little bit about them. And then there is so much happening in Israel. We did not want to leave that out of the show as well. ICJ finding that the West Bank settlements are illegal. You also have extraordinary scenes as the Houthis were able to strike near the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv. Israel responding, so that is on a knife's edge. Also, Ryan, you have some really important reporting over at Dropsite News with regards to Israel as well. Yeah,
the National Security Commission there reviewed a plan to basically foist a quote-unquote moderate Muslim government onto Gaza. That it would be basically like a Vichy Gaza
So like a Western puppet kind of deal.
And it's like it's a real plan. We obtained the entire version of it, and we can run through that. Yeah.
Amazing. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in with the latest with regards to Joe Biden. Just to back up, if you've been living under a rock, let's put the letter up on the screen. Joe Biden posting on Twitter this announcement that he would be withdrawing from the presidential race. He says, I will speak to the nation later this week in detail about my decision. As COVID right now apparently sounds like crap, so they decided to do this letter instead of putting him in front of the cameras once again. He says, it has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. While it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. Now, when this letter initially came out, you and I and everyone else, Ryan, were like, oh, he didn't endorse Kamala Harris. That's interesting. Minutes later, he did endorse Kamala Harris. Let's put this up on the screen. This was in a tweet. He says, my fellow Democrats, I've decided not to accept the nomination to focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president. It's been the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it is time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this. So, Ryan, we have some behind the scenes reporting. We're going to bring in Dave Weigel here in just a few minutes to go through what we know about those final hours that actually pushed Joe Biden into making this decision. But, you know, initial reactions about the extraordinary journey that we've all been through over these past several weeks.
Yeah, quite an oversight to not include Kamala Harris in the initial announcement. And
it seems like they sort of like just didn't think about it and then scrambled to recover, right? Classic
and there was
Biden
some like, hey, wait a minute, you guys said you were going to endorse us. What happened to that? And like, oh yeah, we're doing that in a second post. Don't worry, here it is. It's coming. But yeah, and we'll talk about this throughout the show. The consolidation around Kamala Harris has been pretty swift and broad from the Progressive Caucus, the Black Caucus, the New Dems, most state party chairs coming out saying that they're going to move their delegates in that direction. Party leadership, interestingly, Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, those types, staying out of it at this point and saying that a process needs to unfold. Now, there will be an open convention. There's kind of a misnomer out there. Like, there is no locked-in winner at this point. So there will be an open ballot where delegates are going to be able to vote. There may only be one viable candidate in that. And so how open is it if there's not a race? But we're going to get an actual live vote.
Yeah, and one of the only people who was sort of like mainstream candidate who was flirting with it was Joe Manchin. Donors apparently still loving the Joe Manchin dream, even as he's not even actually a Democrat anymore. But he has come out this morning and said, no, I'm not going to run for president, but also encouraging there to be other contenders and an open process. You know, just to reflect on how we got here, I think it's very clear, number one, Biden did not want to step down. Number two, he really struggled to grapple with how widespread the fallout was from the debate and just what a problem it was. It also appears from the reporting that people have found, Democrats have kind of found a scapegoat for how Biden was in such a bubble. I mean, this is a grown man. He's been in politics a long time. He can read the polls in the New York Times and everywhere else, just like the rest of us can. But we're expected to believe that because one of his top aides, Mike Donnellan, was just sort of cherry picking only the data that made it appear like Joe still had a real shot in the race, that he was able to insulate himself and convince himself that the fallout hadn't been so broad and that he wasn't in as detrimental a position as he really was. And according to the reporting from Politico, finally this weekend, first of all, they hadn't even done battleground polling in months, which is insane at this level. Insane that in 2 months they had not done battleground state polling. So finally they bothered to do some battleground state polling. The reason they didn't do it, the implication is pretty clear, because they didn't want to know the answer of how bad it was. Okay, so they finally did battleground state polling. They brought it to Joe Biden. It showed that in every single battleground state he was losing. Not only that, but in states like Virginia, Colorado, New Mexico, places that they did not think that they were going to have to worry about, the bottom was even falling out there. And that was part of the final straw, not to mention the Pelosi's and Obamas and, you know, the very people who helped to consolidate in 2020, who brought him to power, now had formed a cabal against him and were making it all but impossible for him to remain in the race. So with COVID, alone, isolating in Rehoboth, the writing on the wall, he apparently came to this decision.
And the fundraising mattered too. Fundraising had fallen completely off a cliff. They said it reached something like 25% of expectations. This is the time when fundraising is supposed to surge for both parties. And so when they came to him with the polling in New Mexico and Virginia, they would say, look, money that we need to spend in battleground states, we're going to need to spend now in New Mexico and Virginia and Colorado. Oh, and by the way, we don't have any money.
Right.
And then there was a great line in a Politico article that said Nancy Pelosi had told him early on, you know, we can do this the easy way or the hard way.
Right.
And we gave you about 3 weeks of the easy way. Next week is going to be the hard way.
Yeah.
And if you thought this last 3 weeks was rough, you know, wait until Nancy Pelosi turns the screw, you know, one more notch.
Yeah. I'm very sympathetic to the argument of, like, this whole process is fundamentally anti-democratic. There's no getting around that. But I don't want us to pretend like there was some democratic process that Joe Biden succeeded in, and, you know, this line that he was clinging to and now Republicans are desperately clinging to, and we'll get to that in the Republican bloc about, you know, 14 million people voted for Joe Biden. Does anyone really think that if they had had an actual process, including debates in a Democratic primary, that we would have ended up where we are? No. That's the whole thing, is that because they blocked any sort of a democratic process from playing out, and the very elites who then, you know, did form this consensus against him, they were the ones who protected him and made it so that he was in there for so long, blocked we're part of this overarching cover-up that blocked the American people from being able to see the reality, number one, and number two, to be able to actually go through a democratic process and have a choice. So that's where we are now. The polls are very clear. There is an overwhelming consensus within the Democratic Party and with the nation at large that they wanted Joe Biden to leave. So, the idea that, this was just elites who wanted to push him out for whatever reason is just not accurate. They were the last ones to actually acknowledge what the truth was about Joe Biden. I mean, we did those word clouds but long before the debate with JL Partners, and the number one descriptor for Joe Biden in every single partisan breakdown was old. This has long been, along with, genuine concerns about the economy and, dissatisfaction with the direction of the country. But this has been the primary issue for him. And the other place that it's really borne out is the fact that every single other Democrat, literally every Democrat that I've seen polled across the country, outperforms Joe Biden.
Right.
Regardless of this, whether it's Montana or New York or Pennsylvania, wherever you are, every single Democrat that I've seen polled, and especially swing state Democrats in those Senate races, has been outperforming Joe Biden, oftentimes by double digits. So it shows you that his age, prior to the debate performance, which made it so that this, donor group and Pelosi et al. Could no longer deny the reality that was in front of everyone. Prior to that, the American public already wanted a different option. They already were deeply concerned about this man's ability to serve for another 4 years, when they already saw very clearly, even in the little tiny glimpses, stage managed glimpses that we got of him, even in those glimpses, they could tell what a difficult place he was in and how much he had declined even in just the past couple of years.
Yeah, we were going to get an undemocratic process either way.
Yeah.
More than a majority of Democrats did not want did not want Biden to run for re-election. Now, a majority of the American people didn't want Trump or Biden. And the political system said, well, that's too bad. That's what you're going to get.
Yep.
And so because there was no democratic process to choose the nominee, in order for there to be some facsimile of democracy, which is pressure from people on elites and on those in power to do the thing that they want you to do, that is what participatory democracy actually means. There was no process left. It was just going to have to be full-on pressure. And if 65% plus of Democrats were not calling for Biden to step aside, then you'd have a much better argument that this is not a fair process. And also, this happens all the time in parliamentary systems everywhere. The leader of the party loses the confidence of the party and of the party's base. They hold a vote in the parliament, no confidence, you're done. Like that's just normal. We don't have that. So they had to hack it, and they hacked it, and it took 4 weeks instead of what it would take in the UK, like a week.
Yeah. We managed to get done in a month what every other country gets done in a much faster amount of time. Let's go ahead and put A3 up on the screen, and we can take a look at some of this inside reporting. This is from the New York Times, what happened in the final moments as Biden decided to withdraw. They really set the scene with Biden's diagnosis with COVID, which, by the way, now there's a whole conspiracy theory on the right that he didn't really have COVID. I also love the conspiracy that it wasn't even really him that sent out the letter on Twitter.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, I saw you enjoying that one on Twitter, that it was like, someone who happened to gain control of the accounts, Nancy Pelosi pushing the buttons or whatever, and he just has no idea what's going on. I like that one too. Anyway, they set the scene of him at his house in Delaware, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and he calls and he says, I need you and Mike at the house on late Saturday afternoon, you being Steve Ricchetti and Mike being Mike Donnellan. These are his two probably longest serving, very close aides. As I said, these are also the two that seem to be getting thrown under the bus right now as, creating this bubble and insulating him and, creating this poll denialism where he had no idea, reportedly, how badly he was losing and how bad the fallout was from the debate. So he says, I need you and Mike at the house. Mr. Biden was on the phone from his vacation home in Rehoboth with Steve Ricchetti, one of his closest advisors. The president was referring to Mike Donnellan as chief strategist. Soon, both men were in Rehoboth, socially distanced from the president, who was recovering from COVID. From that afternoon and far into the night, the three worked on one of the most important and historic letters of Mr. Biden's presidency, his decision to withdraw from his re-election campaign after top Democrats, donors, close allies, and friends had pressured him relentlessly to get out. Also in this report and others, Ryan, they talk about how closely held this decision was. We had gotten some reports. I covered one on our channel about how he may be coming to a decision this weekend. It's looking like he's open to the idea of getting out. He and his aides forcefully pushing back against that, planning campaign events for this week. There was also this nugget that was reported of like, he doesn't want to do this before Bibi Netanyahu comes to town because he doesn't want to give Bibi the satisfaction. So it was looking uncertain. And reportedly, even right up to the minutes before he posts this letter on Twitter and makes it official he is dropping out of the race, his team was still calling delegates to make sure that they were still in for him and still had his support. Kamala Harris herself was not notified until shortly before the decision was made. The entire campaign team was notified, I believe, on like a Zoom call, literally a minute before this all went public. So they really held it as close to the vest as they possibly could until he pressed send, or whoever pressed send on the tweet.
Post.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess impressive discipline. Although, for what? So no reporter like gets the little scoop. Okay.
Right.
I guess who cares? Like at that point. But yeah, I mean, he wants to control how he goes out.
Yeah.
I get it. So good for him. And he pulled it off. And it was a tight set of campaign staff that he told. So a lot of the campaign and White House staff learned on Elon Musk's platform that their man was dropping out.
Yeah, Elon Musk is now throwing $45 million a month at Donald Trump.
Which somebody pointed out, classic VC move to buy at the peak. All these VC guys bought Trump at the peak.
Yeah.
Geniuses.
I loved that too. All right, we've got Dave Weigel standing by to give us more insight into how all of this unfolded. So let's get to that. Dave Weigel joins us from Semaphore now. Great to see you, Dave.
Good to be here. Thank you.
I wanted to start with any insight you could offer into how this decision was ultimately made. Ryan brought up this great quote from Politico that they had in their sort of like TikTok of how this went down. They said Biden was bracing for Pelosi to go public this week and possibly even disclose Democratic polling clarifying Biden's dire political straits. Quote, Nancy made clear that they could do this the easy way or the hard way. It was about to be the hard way.
Yes, I didn't have that exact anecdote, but that's what I heard from the very tight circle around Biden, that they made multiple attempts to end this discussion to prove that Biden could handle it. And what really was hurting, look, if he had nailed the debate, none of this would have happened. If he'd nailed his BET interview, it would have been slowed down. It was just that nothing he did, apart from arguably the North Carolina rally right after the debate, gave Democrats confidence that he was going to be a credible nominee. And I don't think they got more worried during the RNC. I actually think they slowed down because of the Trump shooting for the Democrats I was talking to who were on the fence. But yeah, that was going to happen. They were going to keep coming out. You were heading toward not a situation where Democrats come back to Biden, but a situation like October 2016 where Republicans said, yeah, I'm running my own campaign. I don't support the ticket anymore. And that meant Biden would lose, and he couldn't handle that. I think reasonably couldn't handle that. Nobody had been in that position before.
I was hearing from some Democrats that Trump's speech, which some had been, everybody was curious which Trump was going to show up. You know, he'd just gone through a near-death experience. Was he going to be some kind of unifying dynamo that was going to look like he was just going to steamroll to a landslide? When Democrats saw him maybe do a version of that speech for the first 10 to 15 minutes and then go off the teleprompter and for an hour and a half be the old Trump, they started reminding themselves, this guy's really beatable. What are we doing losing to him? And then that gave more juice to the, wait a minute, let's actually try to win this. Did you pick up any of that from Democrats?
I saw it happen in real time the same way, because I was texting Democrats during the RNC, the RNC, but then that speech. And there was a worry on one hand that Biden might view the Trump speech and say, this is not the dynamo that people think I'm running against. This is a weaker candidate. But it was counteracted by what you just said, which is a lot of Democrats saying on Sunday they were worried that Trump might have gotten a huge advantage from the reaction to the shooting. As that speech went on and on and on, really by minute 70, when it was becoming the longest convention speech of all time, they said, okay, this is an undisciplined candidate who you can even run against as faded and lost his fastball in a way that you cannot if Joe Biden's the nominee. So maybe we are in a good position with Kamala. I think it did both at the same time. It briefly, I think, jilted the Biden campaign, thinking that Biden was weak and Democrats would come around. But it did more for Democrats to say we don't need to just take the L and elect Donald Trump this year.
So Democrats are very predictably, now they're out with Joe Biden's the greatest leader of all time. He's like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln in one. He's perfect. He's amazing. We love him so much. And in an effort to keep that Joe Biden image unsullied, they're sort of trying to cast blame on, which I think is deserved, by the way, but I think Joe Biden also deserves a lot of blame for the situation that the country finds itself in and the Democratic Party specifically finds itself in. But it looks like Mike Donnell and Steve Ricchetti are really taking the hit for constructing this bubble around him, keeping out any bad data. This anecdote came out in Politico that they hadn't done battleground polling in 2 months because the national picture looks a little better than when you look at okay, well, how are you doing in Nevada? How are you doing in Arizona? Could you help people understand the dynamic within Biden world and this very, closely knit campaign team and set of advisors that have been with him for such a long period of time, and how this process would have played out with that very close-in team?
It has been pretty well reported by the people on the Biden beat who had a very tough 3 years because the White House gave them nothing. They got to know who Biden took seriously. This was Steve Ricchetti. This is Mike Donnell and Valerie Biden, his sister, Jill, his wife, to an extent Hunter, which was not good for the Biden campaign once that word got out that Hunter Biden was involved in this. But yeah, they were mostly impenetrable because they thought that, and this is pretty well reported over the last couple of days, people had been wrong about Biden enough times that they were not confident that they were right this time. There was bad polling, but these same people, some of the literal same members of Congress and pundits had said Biden can win, and he could. And that fell apart as more information penetrated the cell wall and got to these guys. To what you were saying before, though, there was no perfect way for Biden to leave once he decided to seek the nomination again. What he's getting now is, I think, an echo of what he would have gotten in 2023 if he said, I'm not going to run again. And everyone, I don't think people had talking points they dusted off. They're writing newly today. But that was always going to be how they moved on from Biden if he decided not to run again. He complicated it by winning the nomination. I noticed that the chairman of the Minnesota DFL, when he was endorsing the Harris ticket, said 50 million Democratic primary voters already endorsed the Biden-Harris ticket. That's kind of how they're advancing this. And saying that, well, this is not anti-democratic because everyone assumed who voted for Biden that Harris was on deck. And let's not talk too loudly about this, that Harris might have to serve as president because the president was in his 80s. That's how they're pitching it. But yes, that would have been easier had Biden been talked down in 2023. But at that point, it's easy to blame this inner circle now. At that point, lots of Democrats, even off the record, were saying, yes, the Biden they saw most of the time was on the ball enough that he could win another election. He had beaten Trump before he could do it again. And what you're going to keep seeing is a discussion of when he declined. And Republicans would say it started 5 years ago. He certainly was worse than 2020 than it was in 2016. But really, talking to Democrats outside the Biden circle trying to get in a year ago, they were much more confident that Biden could pull things together. The State of the Union, you remember the hot mic on Jerry Nadler? He was just telling Biden, I like to talk about dementia now. They wanted him to be better. So Biden went from having a close circle that believed this and Democrats outside of it who wanted to believe it to a close circle who believed it and no one else believing it. All those Democrats who were hoping for the best abandoned them, and just enough of them crushed in in the last 2 weeks for them to be convinced we have no party anymore. They're not going to support us.
Dave, what's your VP handicapping? What are you hearing?
It's still been the governors we heard about in the last few days. That's Roy Cooper. That's Josh Shapiro. That's Andy Beshear. Beshear, funny enough, has the fewest weaknesses, the fewest risks, because if he becomes, he has a Republican supermajority legislature in Kentucky. If he became vice president, his Democratic lieutenant governor becomes governor. No real change there. If it's Shapiro, the Republican lieutenant governor Republican president of the Senate becomes lieutenant governor, but it's a Democratic governor. If it's Cooper, when he's retiring, but when he's out of the state, Mark Robinson becomes governor. And some Democrats don't think that's a bad idea because there's a Republican supermajority anyway. And people got to flash forward to what it'd be like to have Governor Robinson. But they're already kind of thinking, how would that work? What would be the downsides for picking those guys? It really has. I've not really heard serious talk about Whitmer. I've heard pundit talk about, pundit too, I guess, but pundit talk about Whitmer being added to double down on the history-making nature of the ticket. I've heard more. There are voters who need to be reassured this is not a change everything ticket, that this is a stability ticket because Democrats have lost the imprimatur of stability in the last 6 months. You don't need to praise Trump to say this, but the Vance ticket is now the one that says we've run this country before. We have no drama. We've had the same nominee all year. Democrats have a more chaotic ticket. And I've heard the governors, the Generation X governors of purple and red states mentioned as people who know how to run. They've won tough races. They'd be easy to introduce to people. I've not heard discussion of the fact that Shapiro, if he is chosen, would be the first Jewish vice president. His wife is Jewish. Doug Emhoff, the currently second gentleman, is also Jewish. I haven't heard about that. I think people are sort of ignoring the more race baiting and othering angles of Republicans because they think you can sell Kamala Harris to the country as a possible commander in chief, and the only people who say I'm ruling her out because she's childless or because she is not a white man, we're never going to vote for her. And you can actually highlight the craziest thing said about her to say that, don't you want to be on this team? Do you really want to be on the eliminationist team, or do you want to be with us? Right.
One report I saw mentioned they're potentially looking at business leaders for the VP slot as well. Is that we're thinking Mark Cuban? Have you heard any chatter about that?
Not yet. The argument there would be in part that Trump is now raising money where Biden needs to be competitive now. But the Harris campaign, I keep saying Biden campaign, it's now the Harris campaign. That they raised $50 million yesterday. So there's a lot of the moment really does matter. They were worried about Biden. Democrats were worried about Biden's abilities at every level, and they were worried about donors striking. And they are not worried about Harris being able to get back those Biden donors. There are not people in the Biden orbit who refuse to give to Harris. There just aren't. There are people who are on the fence who might be interested. And it reminds me of what was happening 10 days ago, where Republicans were saying, it looks like the election is ours. Biden's collapsing. The shooting, a week ago, the shooting in Butler has changed the race, and we don't need to pick somebody who's going to win swing states. We need somebody who's a governing partner for Trump. That's J.D. Vance. I think at this moment, in this very short window, Democrats are not worried about the money, about a Mark Cuban pick. And again, I have heard more. They want just to be, look, the narrative of the Biden campaign is not we're going to change everything. It is we actually changed some things and they're working. You've been so distracted by how old he is, you have not noticed that things are getting better. And how do you sell that? Well, you can sell that with a governor who says, look at my state. Unemployment's down to 4%. Look at what we built. Look at the bridges that are repaired. Look at I-95 being repaired if you're Josh Shapiro, That's the argument they want to make. And a Cuban doesn't fit into that the same way from the Democrats I've talked to.
And lastly, Dave, how are Democrats feeling about now their odds of potentially winning?
Oh, much better. They really were checking out just days ago. Democrats who never were going to concede the election were really worried they can't win this year. Biden does not have what it takes. They now think there is a shot. And they do need Republicans to screw up because there are arguments you can make about Harris beyond just, is she ready to be president? Polling has said voters are skeptical. But you get to roll her out again. You get to do speeches again. You get to do interviews again. And then reintroduce somebody who, when she emerged on the American scene, was not incredibly popular, but not disliked. Why has she been disliked recently? They really think that she can be reintroduced to people in a popular way, and that they know what Republican attacks are coming. They know that Republicans are attack not just the cackle that Trump does, which they don't think is effective, but some positions she took in the 2019 primary that she doesn't hold anymore. They just want to reboot her as the carrier of a successful Obama legacy. And again, they're running up into that, right? If you poll people and say, is the economy getting better? Are we in a recession? People just, mostly Republicans, but a lot of people just think things are still getting worse, even though in important ways they aren't. So selling her with her communication skills, her skills as a courtroom prosecutor, they think they can do it. So I just have not found any Democrat who's more worried today than they were before. Even the ones you would expect who say, oh, well, how does a black woman defeat Donald Trump? Is the country ready for that? I've not heard that from elected Democrats. They really just think, maybe they're overanalyzing this. The problem was Joe Biden could not explain why he needed another term. He could not go on stage and reliably say their message, and she can do that. And they might be overestimating. I mean, like she's taken on more of the social issue, more of the abortion portfolio in the last few months, and she's very good at that. How is she at saying, hey, everybody, interest rates are coming down. Hey, we've explored for more gasoline. Hey, unemployment's at record lows. She can do it, but that's like every hour the story is kind of evolving. So that's her next step. How does she actually perform? Hey, if she has a great rally or a great speech, I think you'll see all of the coconut pill Democrats saying right decision.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Dave, thank you so much. It's so great to have your insights. We're grateful for your time.
Oh, very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.